Hey, what's up everybody? It's McLovin. This is a video about how to make a theory, and I wanted to make this video because I find the theorizing culture very interesting, and I think I have a lot to say about it. And I wanted to inspire others to, make theories of their own. So I wanted to give people a guide on how to make a theory. Step 1 is to choose a subject. Probably something that you enjoy already, something that other people are discussing, because obviously that's going to stimulate conversation, and something with hidden material, details, something that is worth discussing that doesn't have the whole picture included in it. A show like Breaking Bad, for instance, is not great to make a theory about because all the loose ends are tied up. But something like Infinity Train or Deltarune is very good because there's a lot of unanswered questions there that can be filled in by fans. Step 2 is interpret. So you have to interpret the work somehow. You have to apply your own knowledge to tell people how you think of it. You can predict the ending of a work. That's a pretty common theory strategy. That's pretty good. And you can focus on a particular detail that maybe other people have overlooked, or you don't see a lot of discussion about, something that interests you that you don't see a lot of people talking about. That's pretty natural. Step 3, survey. Make sure that someone else hasn't invented your theory already. You're going to get a lot of theories that you think are special, and then you go on the internet and it's like, 10,000 people have already thought of it. See if reading other people's analysis builds on yours. A really good resource for this is Reddit. You can research what people think about various works by going to the dedicated Reddits for those places. And, just enjoy yourself. Just do some research, make some comments, participate in the existing theories. Lurk is what I would say. Step 4 is construct. Now it's time to start actually writing down your theory. So construct the theory in an essay format. There's no real length. I'm not like an English teacher, but try to condense it as much as you can. If you have 9,000 pages of something, you probably don't need it that long. I have a rule with my own writing that I try to cut down everything that I write by half. And there are 3 kinds of evidence you can use when you're constructing the essay form of your theory. Textual evidence, in other words, things that occur in the text. Text means, the film, the book, the show, the video game, whatever. Authorial evidence, which can be anything that the author or the creators have said, and extra-textual. And these are in order of importance. Textual is always the most important. Authorial is very important. There is the concept of death of the author, but I'm not going to get into that here. And extra-textual is things that you're bringing out from outside the text. Step 5 is refine your theory. Discuss it with others and get feedback. And make sure to kind of find constructive feedback. Don't just have people who are going to take your stuff apart. If someone says you're stupid and dumb, they probably don't have your best interests in heart. Show it to people who actually want to look at it. Here's an example theory that I'm going to use to demonstrate my idea. Deltarune is Undertale's prequel. So step 1, I've chosen the subject, Deltarune, obviously. Step 2, interpret. I predict that Deltarune will end and its events will lead into Undertale somehow. And the main piece of evidence that I'm using for that is the note that is drawn by Susie and Kris that appears later in Undertale. Now this isn't confirmed, so I'm not going to, go to bat for this theory necessarily, but you get the idea. I've noticed something, and I'm using it to build a theory. So survey. Now I've just gone to Reddit and looked up, other people theorizing this kind of thing and what they're saying, and more importantly, how people are reacting to it. You can see that these are both downvoted posts, but they have a lot of comments, and this is very valuable. So step 4 is construct. There's textual, authorial, and extra-textual evidence for this theory. Sans' picture, I already mentioned this. Authorial, Toby Fox calls Deltarune a parallel to Undertale, not a sequel. He calls it a parallel in one of the promotional materials, so that's interesting. So it leaves it open. And then extra-textual, it would be cool. Extra-textual evidence could also be things like, other works that have had similar stories to Deltarune, things like that. Like you could compare, Persona 4 and 5 are sequels and prequels, and they are similar to Deltarune. Something like that. That's not necessarily the best example because this is hypothetical. It's a theory that I don't necessarily adhere to, but you get the idea. And then refine it. I've asked some people what if Deltarune came before Undertale? And, a couple people have given me their feedback. It's that easy. So step 6 is kind of a bonus step that I didn't talk about, is doubling down. Now what you're going to want to do is be as obstinate as possible when people face you with inevitably counter evidence, because there's going to be counter evidence to whatever you say. People are going to object to whatever you say, and so the best move is to double down and never admit you're incorrect. This is a concept that's taken from agenda culture, which is like an anime thing, where people essentially try to establish someone as more powerful than they are or weaker than they are, depending on which agenda they have. It's very fun. Look up like agenda culture. It gets kind of interesting. So, what is the nature of truth? We're talking about how to double down on your Deltarune fan theory here. Is truth constructed or is it determined? The philosopher David Hume posited that there are two kinds of knowledge. There are relational ideas, in other words, ideas that are conditional on other things, and there are matters of fact, or what Hume would, I don't think he would call it objectivity, but he would position it very close to objectivity. So rational ideas are contingent logic, like math or something, if X, therefore Y, and they're not object dependent. In other words, they can be reasoned simply by thinking. And then there are matters of fact, which are contingent on reality and objective or empirical, or as close to objective and empirical as we can get. Such as statements like, the tree is 12 meters tall, my eyes are brown, I am handsome, etc. Is objectivity possible? According to Hume, the answer is no. All facts are contingent in a regressive chain. I've talked about this before with the Ouroboros. For instance, the ball is red because of the paint, because of the dye, because of the plant that is red, because red exists because of how photons bounce off a flower, because we perceive red, etc., etc. Everything comes back to a specific subjective qualia that we experience as people. In spite of the infinite regress of these facts and the subjective nature of everything, there are consensus facts. And consensus facts are very close to objective reality. There are things that it's very difficult to disagree with. For instance, the sky is blue. The sky isn't always blue, of course. Sometimes it's gray because it's covered in clouds. Sometimes it's black because it's nighttime. But saying the sky is blue is as close to an objective fact as we can get. The length of an inch is objective because we decided on it. The weight of an ounce is subjective. Colors are objective. So this is the way I'm going to be using the word objectivity in this video. So let's construct some truth from consensus facts. So we're still talking about Undertale fan theories here and how to defend your Undertale fan theory and construct a base of truth around it. Consensus facts can be constructed into subjective rational ideas. This happens all the time. That tree is large, some trees fall down, therefore that tree is dangerous. Not everyone is going to look at this tree and think that tree is dangerous, but some people are, and they can defend it from things that have happened to them in the past or objective measures that they view of it. If the facts are provable, or the objective facts, so to speak, the outcome is logical. This is very basic stuff. So there are a couple of types of consensus facts. This isn't a comprehensive list, but there are measures, which are inches, colors, traits, etc. That's what I used before. Cause and effect, water boils when heated. And then scientific contingency, which are the results from an experiment implying something from the scientific community that we understand that doesn't necessarily come off as intuitive to us, like electricity and how it works. It's consistent, but it's not really intuitive, is what I mean. Now, there are some issues when you are constructing reality. In other words, there are reasons that people might object to the reality that you have constructed out of these objective facts. And there are three main kinds of issues. There's disagreement, which is a mutually exclusive conclusion from similar facts. In other words, two people respond to facts in certain ways. Like, I could say that according to the FBI crime statistics website, crime has gone down since the 90s. And I interpret that to mean, policing is not necessary. But someone else might interpret that means that the high level of policing has been effective. And which one is true, I'm not here to discuss, but I'm saying that's a type of disagreement you could have. Another issue with constructing reality is falsehood, where one of your premises is proven to be wrong. Like if you say the sky is green, therefore I like the sky. and someone points out that the sky is not green, that's going to be a problem for you liking the sky. And then finally, skepticism, which is someone who is not convinced with the amount of facts that you've provided. And I'm going to talk about how to deal with all of these issues with constructing reality as it pertains to Deltarune fan theories. You have to manage your constructed reality if it is if someone has an issue with it, and you can manage this in several different ways. If someone has a disagreement, you can use ad hominem. You can disparage the disagreeer or their argument by basically insulting them, maybe calling them stupid, stuff like that. You emphasize the facts in your argument while emphasizing the conclusions in your argument. For instance, in the previous example, I said, the FBI says crime has gone down, and someone disagrees with my conclusion. I could say, well, it's real that the crime has gone down. You can look it up yourself. And I'm kind of, I'm getting out of the problem by, focusing on the facts as true, which are, or you can accept their argument as your own and facetiously kind of pretend to agree with them. That's another strategy. If someone brings you a falsehood, in other words, someone brings you one of your premises or facts is fake, you can insist upon the truth of your premises. This sometimes works if you just seem confident enough people will believe you. You can react skeptically to their premises. In other words, you can use skepticism to your advantage and say, well, you need more evidence that I'm wrong, basically. You can complain about being silenced. You can pretend that there is a big bad boogeyman out there who's saying people don't want me talking about this, so, obviously their goons are going to come after me. Or you could just lie. You could, this is a pretty tried and true method. You could just tell lies. That's a pretty good way to advance your issues. If someone approaches you with skepticism, there are a lot of ways to get out of that, like testimonials. You can use anecdotal evidence. You can use a sort of passionate story. You can lean on the pathos of that. You can agree that there needs to be more research and then facetiously move on as if that, hand waves the problem. Or you can just berate skeptics. That's more ad hominem. You can position them as pedants. It's very easy to position skeptics as pedants in this way. So this is how you construct a new reality. And this is how you are going to prove that your Deltarune fan theory is correct in the marketplace of ideas, so to speak, in public. If truth is built from an interplay of facts, then different facts construct different realities, and the interpretations thereof also construct different realities. So first, what you should do is you should come to a conclusion and then find facts to retrofit your conclusions. In other words, decide you believe something is true and then find evidence later. That's a good way to do it. That's how the greats do it. You can also make up facts, which is just lying. So let's bring this back to the Deltarune prequel theory. There are a couple conflicting facts with the Deltarune prequel theory that you might run into, like how some people might say, oh, Toby Fox called Deltarune a parallel story like I talked about before, so that means it's not a prequel, it's parallel. Parallel means it's side by side, not one after the other. And there could be a couple responses to this. You could say parallel proves it isn't a sequel, and if it's not a sequel, that's evidence for your theory, which is that it's a prequel. You could say Toby said that a while ago, so it might not be true anymore. There have been other things that Toby Fox has said that are cryptic or incorrect. Or you could just say it was a mistranslated interview, which is a lie. But you could say that. And if you do say that, then someone has to come along and disprove you, so you're adding to the things that they need to address. So as you lie more and get more and more facts out there, there are going to be things that people will come back and say aren't true. But if you lie more and more, then the number of things that people have to disprove compounds. And so some stuff is going to slip through the cracks. So what I would suggest is just lie as much as possible if you really want people to believe you, which is kind of counterintuitive, but it's true. How do people decide on their beliefs? That's an important question relating to the nature of truth, which I was talking about previously. So mostly people think that they come to beliefs by way of logic, and this is entirely incorrect. People come to beliefs basically arbitrarily. The mind adopts unconscious beliefs, and then you retrofit them to fit, like I was talking about before. These beliefs can come from authority figures, especially from when you were a child, past experiences, especially trauma, your emotional needs. So if you, have an emotional need that you have unmet and something is threatening that, then you're going to more likely to disagree with it. And then in-group thinking, that's just the classic, I want to believe the same thing that my friend believes, and I don't really want to start an argument. And this is the system of belief. And you can exploit this incredibly easily. And it doesn't necessarily have to be based on facts and logic like I've been talking about before. So first you have to construct your beliefs. And this is related to Deltarune fan theories because we've already been constructing a belief that we have. Now we're going to construct a belief as it pertains to someone else, how to make someone else believe this stuff. So you can do a couple things. You can exploit or build upon a previously held notion. You can establish a fear in the subject. That's a really great way to create a belief. You can pressure others to conform to your belief. This doesn't always work because people might secretly disagree with you. We'll get more into that later. You can construct a villainous outgroup. So if someone doesn't believe what you believe, you can sort of villainize them and paint them as immoral. That's a pretty good way. And then you can decrease the critical thinking in whatever subject you're trying to instill belief in. So try to make them think as little as possible and have an emotional reaction about what you're presenting them with. That's a really good strategy. So relating this back to the Deltarune prequel theory, which is what the video is about, Undertale and Deltarune are connected. You look like an idiot if you don't accept prequel theory, and prequel non-believers are morons. These are just easy ways to, make someone believe what you are peddling very easily. So now let's talk about entrenching your belief. You've made someone believe something, but now you need to inoculate them against people who are going to try to sway them from that belief. And when you're building your Deltarune fan theory, you need to give subjects your thought-terminating cliches to use on outsiders, which I've already talked about previously, prequel non-believers are morons. You really want to instill an in-group and out-group. Ritual disparagement is very good. If you, get in a circle and insult each other, that's pretty good. That's a great way to, instill your Deltarune fan theory in someone else. You can have codes of conduct that denote people as insiders of the group. Things like dress codes in your Deltarune fan theory. You can control speech in your Deltarune fan theory. And then you can also create a sense of outside oppression, like other people out there who aren't part of the in-group are trying to harm us inside our Deltarune fan theory. So next you're going to want to choose a location for where you want your temple to be. And there's a couple of tips that I have from personal experience on this. You're going to want a secluded place, somewhere out in the woods that's hard to get to, which is going to entrench the in-group because it's somewhere that's hard to get to, and it's going to entrench the out-group because the in-group isn't seeing the out-group as much in your Deltarune fan theory. You're going to want it to be in a foreign country, and you're going to want to look up if they deport criminals back to America. Or if you live in another country, you're going to want to look at the treaties and so forth. Something easily defensible is ideal. A mountain fortress is very good to construct your Deltarune fan theory. And you're going to want to start creating space between yourself and people in the in-group in your Deltarune fan theory. You're going to want to talk through auxiliaries. In other words, you're going to want to have like a mouthpiece. You're going to want to have people who do your dirty work for you if you need anyone hurt or killed in your Deltarune fan theory. And overall, create a sense of fear and mystery for your Deltarune fan theory. Next is some tips to avoid law enforcement in your Deltarune fan theory. You're going to want to choose to use cash in most of your transactions, and the cash is going to be held by like a trusted treasurer. That's a good idea. Always wear hooded clothing and hats if you're going into public places because of how surveillance is these days. Use burner phones. That's pretty typical. And of course, avoid other illegal activity. In other words, try to avoid encounters with law enforcement if possible. And I guess my biggest tip in your Deltarune fan theory, if you're trying to get people to believe you, is try to either bribe or otherwise buy off local law enforcement. This is easier in other countries as well. Here's a couple tips about how to stop being usurped in your Deltarune fan theory. You're going to want to establish a divine mandate. Maybe if you're in a Deltarune fan theory, that's something like, Toby Fox says that I'm the leader of this Deltarune fan theory, so anyone else is not legitimate as a leader. You're going to want to pit subordinates against each other. In other words, you're going to want to have your subordinates always vying for higher positions. A good way to do this that I've used is you have a second-in-command system that's formal, and you have you rotate out your second-in-command every week or so and have people vie over it. Maybe it's like a competition. Maybe it's something where, you know, someone kills the second-in-command, then they get to be the second-in-command. Resource scarcity is a great way to do it. And then labeling insiders as like outsider spies, even if that's not true, is a really great way to increase loyalty in your Deltarune fan theory. Now, the final step that I have is if your Deltarune fan theory doesn't hold up and the police do apprehend you in your mountain fortress, what you're going to want to do is a couple steps, and these work in varying levels depending, but change your name, that's step one. Try to change your appearance as well. If you can't change your name and appearance, you're going to want to move away. That's pretty simple. Moving away is, you know, just leave, run away, flee. A lot of dictators have done that in the past for Deltarune fan theories. Faking your own death is a great way to do it because it creates the denouement which people desire when they've been scammed in a Deltarune fan theory and all their money has been taken away and so forth. That can create a lot of good stuff, and it can get you off scot-free. Jumping off a cliff into a waterfall is pretty good. Or if all else fails, you can fake illnesses for sympathy or just plead insanity. These are all pretty good ways to ensure that you're not going to face consequences for your Deltarune fan theory. So anyway, I hope that everyone has enjoyed this video. And as always, like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, tickle my balls. Thank you.